and welcome to Bread and Thread, a podcast about food and domestic history. I'm Liz.
And I'm Hazel. We are two friends who studied archaeology together and love history. And today we have a third person.
Nick is back to talk to us more about medieval stuff.
Yeah,
This falls firmly into the early modern camp.
Medieval-ish.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
medieval
early
in some
modern
circles.
is just medieval in a nicer coat.
Yeah.
It's just medieval in a nicer climate.
Yeah, and it's got a printing press to tell all of its buddies about its nicer coat.
And special laws about who can wear the nice coats. But
Yeah.
that's going to be a different episode. That's going to be next episode.
Yes.
This episode.
That does remind me of a question I have, because there's always controversy about how you start and end an era, like, academically speaking. There's sort of always talking in medieval studies about, all right, is it 1450, 1475? Do we count the discovery of the quote unquote new world as when it becomes early modern? And I wondered, what's the in archaeology and like more material history, what's the big kind of crossover point where people have firmly digging their heels in? Is it the same thing of like,
Well, in UK archaeology, it's generally 1485. Because that's the Battle of Bosworth, so it's when you go from Plantagenets to Tudors. That's the line between medieval and early modern.
of course that makes sense, because a lot of the kind of study, like in that I encountered, was a lot of dealing with the more interiority and the difference between public and private selves. And there's a hell of a lot of scholarship invested in trying to get inside the head of the Tudors and seeing them as kind of prototypical modern rulers, in a sense. We look at them in the way that people often do with presidents and premiers of the 20th century.
But anyway, what have you been making or baking, Hazel? Because we're going to do the structure of the episode. We're not getting into philosophy here.
Oh, but what if I want to philosophize on this domestic history podcast?
This is not a historical theory podcast.
Oh,
if someone wants to give us Patreon money to make them a bonus episode about the line between medieval and early modern, we will do that. But this is not about that. This is about an Italian manners book.
It is saying so you could make some cracking historiography merch.
Are you saying I can't talk about post-processualism?
I think if you do, I will come to Kent or Sussex. I don't remember which one you're in. I will come to the south.
Just a blur to you.
I will come to the south and I will physically fight you.
I mean, that's contemporary archaeology, isn't it? Anyway,
theory was the bane of my life at undergrad. I hated it. I wanted to look at bones.
I like contemporary. I'm sorry.
I like contemporary. I don't like theory.
I mean, it's okay that you just want to look at bones, because books are just tree bones.
Yes, they are. What have you been making or baking, Hazel?
So I have been. Did I talk about this on the last? I don't think I did. I'm making up my dress form, which is a pattern from Bootstrap Fashion, where you can send your measurements and they will like send you a pattern to make your own like custom dress form, which is a much cheaper way of getting a customized dress form, except that you have to make it yourself. So this sounds like an advert. It's not an advert. It's just what I've been doing.
It is very cool, and I would like to do it. But the problem is, I need a dress form to learn how to do the sewing thing. You can see the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily. It depends what you're doing. Like, whether you want to kind of go straight into doing your own design and stuff. But Yeah, I would say it's not been easy for me, but it's definitely doable. Like I've learned quite a bit of new stuff doing this, and the materials are stuff that you can easily find, and it's pretty. It seems to be pretty accurate to my body. Although I have heard some things about the bust height and stuff, like not always matching up. So I think it's always worth it if you wanted to do that to provide like all of the measurements, because there's an optional extra measurement section. But yeah, it seems
kind of do what they want.
Yeah, that is true. There's no taming them, but yeah, it seems to be shaping up pretty well so far, and yeah, it's weird. There's like a deflated human torso just hanging out in my on my ironing board right now. Yeah, that's been an interesting process, and I will hopefully be finished soon. What about you?
I don't think I've made anything new because large projects. I finished the blanket that I'm making for you, and I planted some edible flowers.
I'm internally screaming. Awesome.
Because I like to eat flowers, and those are the ones you can eat without getting sick.
I love the idea of colourful salads.
Like my demon is a goat, and I wish to eat the flowers.
You crave that vegetable.
I do crave that vegetable. So Nick, you terrible, terrible person. What are you teaching us about?
Is this how you treat all your guests?
Just the ones I'm married to.
Okay. Well, what I'll be talking about is a guy who was a fixture of my undergrad degree and who cropped up a
Your
bit.
undergrad degree being English Lit.
Yes. And also cropped up in medieval studies. He is the go-to man for discussions of early modern societal trends and fashions and courtly life. And you know, there's a crowded field. There's so many.
The gossip girl.
He is the gossip girl. It's Baldassare Castiglione and his book of the Courtier.
XOXO.
Medieval Italian names are so good.
They are amazing. There's some cracking ones in here. But first I shall like, explain a little bit more what it's about and how it's put together. It's basically a discussion, a long discussion over a few days with Castiglione putting in these real historical figures, and people are exchanging views about what to wear, what not to wear, how to not sound too boastful, how to just get everything just right so that nobody thinks you're the biggest tool in the shed. Basically.
Okay, so it's not like actual real conversations. It's like he's made them up as examples.
Yeah. For instance, there's a conversation between Cesare Gonzaga, another good name, and Federico, who probably has a much longer noble name, but I don't care about that right now. Yeah, there's this where Gonzaga says, "If a gentleman is worthy in other things, what he wears will neither enhance nor diminish his reputation." But you are right, answered Federico. Although who of us, when he sees a gentleman passing by, wearing a gown corded in various colours, or covered with strings and ribbons and bows and cross-lacings, does not take him for a fool or a clown? Anyone who may have lived for some while in Lombardy, said Pietro Bembo.
Oh, Bembo.
Yeah, that gives you a little flavour of how it's put together. This is quite a nice translation, I think, by George Bull. Thank you, George Bull. It's very that did feel like a very modern a very modern conversation compared to some of the translations I imagine we've all had to look at of older historical texts.
Definitely. I do. I know it's very silly, but I enjoy Bembo being in there just being sassy because he was a lover of Lucrezia Borgia. So I enjoy him just being in there, like, and here's Bembo's opinion.
It's Bembo time.
Like he was a poet and probably slept with Lucrezia Borgia, and that's basically everything that he's known for.
Pretty much.
Okay, this really is like celebrity gossip.
Yeah, it's one of those texts where you feel like you'd enjoy it a lot more coming to it later. I think when talking about my own personal experience of reading this, because this is in the middle of looking at, say, Paradise Lost or Hamlet or other things like that, where a lot of the other things we'd read from the early modern period would be very action packed or procrastination packed with some pretty speeches. But this is something that seems very, very abstract and far removed to a lot of people. It's very much the kind of thing that you will only ever read if you're a student of this subject. But then you do come across some thoughts in here, and you go, "Oh my God, we've been having the same conversations for centuries."
Yeah, and I think it is especially in the clothing section, isn't it? Which is what I wanted you to talk about.
Yeah. Like somebody's somebody's saying, so all people talk about courts in the same way as they talk about everything else, and affirm that those which they remember from the past were far more excellent and full of outstanding men than those we know today. Like, people have found it's never too early to start being nostalgic.
Yeah, isn't there a quote from Cicero where so in like ye ancient Roman times where he's just like, well, times are not as good as they used to be. Children don't listen to their parents, and everyone is writing a book.
Yeah.
There's literally everyone just goes, back in my day.
Yeah.
It's the human condition.
Yeah.
Like we established a couple of episodes ago that people go, is anyone going to eat that? People also go, back in my day. These are the two things people say.
One thing that really stood out to me in looking at it for kind of fashion and things like that was discussing whether or not fashion counts as a form of deceit, whether trying to make yourself look better than you are is obscuring your true character, or you're merely enhancing what's already there. Like, yeah, where like
Taketh young lady swimming on thou first date.
Yeah. Here's an example. And if you have a lovely jewel without a setting, and it passes into the hands of a good goldsmith, who greatly enhances its beauty by setting it well, would you not say that he is deceiving the eye? And yet he deserves praise for the deception, since with good judgment and skill, his cunning hands often add grace and adornment to ivory or silver, or to a lovely stone by setting it in fine gold. So you must not say that art, or this kind of deceit, if you want to call it so, deserves censure. Nor is it wrong for a man who believes he is competent in some matter to seek cleverly the occasion when he can demonstrate his abilities, and, in the same way, to conceal the things that he believes merit little praise, though everything should be done with circumspection and reserve. Do you not recall that without appearing to seek them out, King Ferdinand was always ready to seek the opportunity from time to time to go out in his doublet? And this he did because he was proud of his physique. And also, since he did not have attractive hands, that he rarely, if ever, took off his gloves. I also seem to remember having read that Julius Caesar very readily took to wearing a laurel wreath in order to hide his baldness. But in all these matters, one must be very prudent and judicious, so as not to exaggerate in any way. Very often, in avoiding one error, a man falls into another, in seeking to win praise, wins blame.
Okay, that was a very long but very interesting quote. But now all I can think about is the King of Spain walking around in a tank top and gloves.
Yeah,
There's a look.
basically.
I like it.
It is a look.
Probably a leathery tank top.
Oh, that phrase makes me uncomfortable. But also merch idea.
Yeah, go for it. Can you get some Redbubble leathery tank tops?
We can try.
Okay.
I really
Yeah,
do like
I'm-
the sentiment in that though, because it's essentially saying like, well, yeah, it's changing the look of something to make you look at it differently, but that's okay because it's done for good reasons, which I like because I thought it was going to go towards the whole, dressing above your station or to conceal certain things is trickery. Like people like to say that about people who wear a lot of makeup, like, oh, it's trickery. I guess would be a modern parallel. Um, but then, yeah, I really like that notion of like, well, yeah, but that's okay. Like, it's all good.
Absolutely, yeah. It's yeah, Cesare Gonzaga talks specifically about the real or fake beauty of a woman, but it seems like it's a very tricky thing that Castiglione's doing when he makes these statements about the deceptions of skill or having some character or another say, taketh thine woman swimming, because you know you can't necessarily pinpoint one of these people because none of them are Castiglione, and say, that's what he thinks. That's the claim he's making. I think that allows him to play things very safe in a way because it's sort of just a low stakes drama or comedy is what's happening here. They're just they're just talking. They're
But the fact that it's fictionalized version of real people is really odd. Like if I went out and wrote a book where like I don't know who equivalents would be, like Charles Dance and Carol Ann Duffy just have a conversation about people going out in stiletto heels. Like that's basically the same thing.
you know what this is? It's The Crown.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's RPF.
Oh no! So that is
It's political RPF.
that's the bone of contention here. Is it like The Crown or is it RPF or is The Crown RPF?
I would argue that The Crown is RPF.
Okay.
Absolutely is. Yeah, it's
Um,
fictionalized
For
accounts of.
people who don't know, that's real people fiction or fanfic about actual people.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Which The Crown absolutely is because it's a fictionalized drama about real people who are still living now, which
Yeah, like it's not historical fiction because yeah, like I think at the point that The Crown's at now, pretty much every character in it is still alive.
Yeah, just
So
about.
it's just RPF, as is this book, which
but then again, I guess you could argue this book is fictional accounts of real people, but for the purpose of discussion. Like it's not really, I suppose, trying to represent the opinions of these people. Like it's more like this is for the purposes of like discussion. It's just okay. You can imagine these people having the discussion.
oh yeah, like I get that, but I still find it. I know it's like a thing. Like Plato had things where he made up conversations between him and just random made up people to make his points. Like this isn't a new thing when he's doing it, but I still find it really weird. Like it's not as bad as Plato basically making up people in order to own them, which I'm sure our philosopher former housemate would agree is exactly what that is.
Yeah,
but it's still odd.
It is.
Certainly is.
So what sort of opinions is he espousing then, or are these fictionalized real people espousing? Because I saw you making a lot of notes.
Well, there's this one count. I think it's Count Ludovico. Has the problem like the somebody's side of a conversation starts on one page and it goes to the 3 pages on, so it's hard to tell which count is doing the
Some
misogyny.
Italian noble.
Yeah, some Italian nobles doing the misogyny. Yeah, it's kind of I mean, it's hard. I'd say it's one of those kind of patch. This guy's doing something that's kind of a patronizing. I respect women. I like them, but have they considered doing all of these things differently? Because that's how I like it. It's like, um, now every woman is extremely anxious to be beautiful, or at least failing that to appear so. So when nature has fallen short in some way, she endeavors to remedy the failure by artificial means. That is why we have women beautifying their faces so carefully and sometimes painfully, plucking their eyebrows and forehead, and using all those tricks and suffering and all those little agonies which you ladies imagine men know nothing about, but which they know only too well.
Oh,
See, that is a very common thing, isn't it? It's, the ladies want to be beautiful. I can't imagine why. I can't imagine what outside force is telling women that they have to be beautiful.
Yeah. I
It's
feel
just them being weird.
Yeah, I feel like in this next bit you start to feel the response to this is interesting because it makes me start to feel maybe Castiglione is more on the woman's side because there's quite a put down here by Madonna Costanza Fragoso. Who laughed and said, "It will be far more courteous of you to continue with your discussion and to say, what is the source of grace, and speak of courtiership rather than seek to expose the faults of women to no purpose."
Nice. Hazel, as the woman on this podcast, what are your opinions
token
about
lady.
Italian Count number 1?
Well, it very much sounds like the dude who is sort of trying to show off with his knowledge of all the, like you said, all the little sufferings that women do and think that men don't know anything about, but we do. Yeah, it's sort of like, do you though?
Is he the fake ally?
Yeah, it sort of seems like a I guess not necessarily passing judgment on it, but it seems quite much, It's sort of like, oh, I see what you're all doing to try and be beautiful, but he doesn't really talk about the why of it. Like you said, it's more of a comment on what people are doing, without any thought to why they might be doing this other than just to be beautiful because reasons.
Because wanting to be beautiful is a neutral thing with no particular cause or effect.
Yeah, this guy gets worse, by the way.
Oh
do
no!
I want to hear him get worse? Yeah, surely you realize how much more graceful a woman is who, if indeed she wishes to do so, paints herself so sparingly and so little that whoever looks at her is unsure whether she is made up or not, in comparison with one whose face is so encrusted that she seems to be wearing a mask, and who dare not laugh for fear of causing it to crack, and who changes color only when she dresses in the morning, after which she stays stock still all the rest of the day like a wooden statue, letting herself be seen only by torchlight, in the way a wily merchant shows his cloth in a dark corner.
So yeah, take us young lady swimming.
Yeah, that is that to a T, isn't it?
I mean, that is so modern in its sentiment. Like, that's the exact same conversation that happens today about the whole no makeup look thing.
But it's also in an era where makeup is there to deliberately make you look like all pale but with some red bits.
Pale, but not in the way.
Like, it's not as bad as now where it's like, yes, I just have naturally blue glittery eyelids. but it's still not great.
It's the pale that makes it look like I'm saintly, not like I'm dying.
Yeah, we're not Victorian.
I think it's interesting that like certainly beauty standards change, but this conversation doesn't.
Yeah. It strikes me as one of the interesting things about this period that Castiglione is really exemplifying here is there's a sort of lateral move in a sense because you can see there's more of a development of the idea of the public and the private, especially in a bit that I want to read out that follows that just in just a second. Um, you get this increased perception of public and private, which allows for more just more interesting drama, for instance, and more. It just opens up a whole lot of other gateways for discussion, but at the same time means there's something else you can accuse a woman of, aside from somebody being impious. As they've got this whole system of courtliness that's really expanding in complexity, and it means there's so many more things that you can do wrong.
And it's all women's fault.
Yep. Yeah, it gets really weird here, talking about how if you see a woman passing along on the way to church, does it and yeah, she has to raise just enough of her skirt to reveal her foot and open a little of her leg. Does it not strike you as a truly graceful sight if she is seen just at that moment, delightfully feminine, showing her velvet ribbons and pretty stockings? Certainly I find it very agreeable, as I'm sure you all do, because everyone assumes that elegance in a place where it is generally hidden from view must be uncontrived and natural, rather than carefully calculated, and that it cannot be intended to win admiration. There's the thing, it's like
ladies wearing fancy underwear are more pious.
There's the thing. It's an interesting.
Is that a correct interpretation?
Well, the way I'm seeing it is kind of you don't know you're beautiful, almost.
I was just thinking that, like, not to quote 2010's Pop, but you don't know you're beautiful. That's what makes you beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, is he saying that? Well, it's interesting that you think all this is uncontrived. I guess that the first person is saying that like it seems more desirable or more elegant to them because it's like uncultivated, or like it's seen as something like that's normally covered, but in this case is candid, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
I guess it's a combination. I think it's definitely an all of the above thing. It's oh, I'm not supposed to see that. She's not trying to show agency, so I don't feel threatened.
And also, yeah, again with it being a very modern thing, it's that thing of be perfect, but don't be high maintenance. You have to be effortlessly perfect and attractive.
Yeah,
otherwise you're deceitful. You're terrible sluts with your ribbons.
Yeah, it's very much. I'm going to mix metaphors horribly here. It's a tightrope thing. It kind of comes across as like this isn't human interaction. You're talking about Signor Counterino. You're talking figure skating. The effortless but privately pursuing perfection and the appearance of effortlessness. Like how many more of these little agonies would you need to go through to be this guy's perfect girl?
I'm gonna guess all of them.
Yeah.
I do have to say though, if I was a Renaissance lady and I had, spent money on all of these really pretty stockings and garters and ribbons and things, and spent all the time getting dressed up in them, I would definitely flash some ankle and calf. Like, I didn't spend all this money on expensive garters for nobody to see them.
I have to ask, does this book have a lot of stuff about men's fashion and things like that? Because, I mean, that went wild in this period.
Here and there, yeah, here and there.
I'm guessing not as much, but there has to be something.
Yeah. There's I mean, like the big things that stood out to me was like the discussion of, a lot of men dressing flashily look like clowns, unless you're in Lombardy. But because
Apparently.
yeah, everybody dresses like that in Lombardy.
Oh, those wacky Lombards.
The wacky Lombards. It's my favorite Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Yeah, it does seem to be men don't look like a clown. Look nice, but don't do the kind of Ferdinand Julius Caesar midlife crisis kind of thing. Yeah, don't wear the leather tank top, but just be classy. These there's not too much. There's a lot more about the interiority of men, as is the least surprising thing. Just here's how you try to flatter somebody without seeming slimy. Here's how you, bring up your poetry or ask the king's theatre censor to read your stage play. I don't know if anybody actually says that in there, but they may as well do.
Does sound like useful advice.
Yeah, it's more practical advice towards men, and then some admonishments from men to women in this. It seems. I feel like I'm giving a reductive view, like a more detailed reading. I think would show would delve further into the women of this book, because they're very interesting in the way that they respond very politely but pointedly to this stuff.
I'm sure, but I think, yeah, it's not a short book, and we're half an hour in already.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I noticed just before the episode started, which I found really interesting, was somebody being incredibly modern, Federico, talking about responding to a guy called Signor Magnifico. I know that's going to be more of
Mr. Magnificent.
I know it's going to be more of a title than a name. I'm sure he's got a proper.
But also name. Mr. Magnificent.
Mr. Magnificent. Yeah. He's talking about somebody is being quite stern about women, like being in passionate love and whatnot is not suitable for women who are married, and talking about women wanting to have affairs, and just wow, a woman exercising sexual agency, that's tricky.
Disgusting.
Yeah. But Federico says, I think this opinion of yours seems to be very austere, and I imagine you must have learned it from some preacher of the sort that reproach women for falling in love with ordinary laymen, so that they can keep the best things to themselves. Indeed, I think you're imposing excessively hard rules on married women, but there are many to be found whose husbands hate them for no reason at all, and do them great injury, sometimes by loving other women, sometimes by subjecting them to all the annoyances they can think of. And then again, some women are forced by their fathers to marry old men who are in poor health and filthy and disgusting, who make their lives one long misery. And if these women were allowed to get a divorce from those with whom they are so badly matched, then perhaps it would be improper for them to love someone other than their husband. But sometimes through bad fortune or incompatibility of temperament or some other cause, it happens that in the marriage bed, which ought to be a haven of concord and love, cursed and devilish dissension plants its evil seed to produce anger, suspicion, and the sharp forms of hatred which torture those unhappy souls, cruelly bound together till death by an indissoluble bond.
Is this pro-divorce Renaissance Italian?
It is pro-divorce Renaissance Italian. That is because the thing is, there's some nice writing in this book at various points on various different sides. There's I do think that at the very least, when he's making characters say some horrible stuff, he's at least being reasonably inventive about it. Like a lot of it comes across as very hackneyed now because we've heard the kind of "oh, you don't want to smile in case it ruins your makeup" thing a million times. But 500 years ago, people have only
Cutting
said,
edge.
yeah, people would only said that half a million times. So it's new stuff. Um, but with this, it's very impassioned there. It's yeah, it seems to be very, very particularly upset about the filthy and disgusting old men in poor health. Like unhappy about a husband treating a wife badly, but also, oh man, these beautiful ladies, they deserve better. By the way, Federico, I'm always around. But
No, it's
I could be reading
I,
malign things into it.
No, I was getting that as well. It's a little bit White Knight.
Yeah, a little bit.
it seems like he's sort of doing his best to present sort of objective conversations, as it were. Then, I mean, obviously, not because it's all him writing, but yeah, I mean, I'm unclear on whether does it end with the like do any characters win the argument at some point, or is it more just there's conversations between people giving sort of both sides of the argument?
Is it kind of a like pause your video here to discuss lipstick?
Well, would you like to know who has the last word in this book?
Would.
Signora Emilia replied, on condition that if Signor Gaspari should want to criticize women and slander them in his usual manner, he shall give his bond to stand trial, for I arraigned him as a fugitive from justice.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
Excellent.
had to ask,
yeah.
do we know that this was a real man that wrote this? Because I'm getting vibes in places that it's a lady just being like, I'm sick of all of these men telling me what to do.
He's
Like, do we know that he is a real person?
oh yeah, he's very well documented. Papal nuncio.
Disappointing.
Yeah, but I guess that he was just a genuinely um forward-thinking figure for 1528, which is
Mm.
that's some pretty strong stuff in that book. Because I forgot how it ended. I thought it was just going to be, and shall we discuss these matters some more? No, sir. No, I need to return to my studies and you to your court. I wish you well. And you also. Like, that's exactly how you'd expect it to end,
Yeah,
isn't it?
but instead it's almost exactly 500 years ago, a woman saying, stop criticizing
Yeah,
women,
like
please.
they have a lot of those goodbyes, and it's the dawn. Dawn begins, and everybody's leaving after the party. But it is very much a kind of. By the way, you thought it was just going to be an open-ended thing, but just so you know,
Would like to state an opinion.
mm, and I think this would be a very interest. It is a very interesting book, imagined written by a woman. Um, but it's also it's to me it's very interesting that this about how perceptive he is, like
Mm.
when writing about those concerns and about those expectations, because I can imagine somebody being, in some cases, you're being a bit too harsh. Not all women are like this deceitful model you're setting out, but in fact he's going a bit further and saying, well, that's a bit much. Your expectation here and there, it does make these people sound quite unreasonable.
it sounds like a thing that has been written by someone who has definitely spent a lot of time hanging around in the courts and with the nobility, and was heard all of these kinds of discussions go on again and again.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it with as papal nuncio in particular. I imagine that I know that the Vatican has always been very much a driving force in earthly affairs in a period. Of course, all sorts of battles and things happened. But as a nuncio, you imagine him to be less involved than some other ambassadors and courtly types in that in the um, in the grottier things. He's like, by the way, the church says no, stop it, rather than just turning up for canapes and just being able to do whatever because you got the power. He's representing the Pope, so
Mm.
maybe that made him a bit more of a bystander in a sense.
I'd love to know what his relationship with his wife was like.
Yeah,
Because nuncios could get married, couldn't they? So I assume that he had one.
I'm just gonna have a little peek. Um, it's essentially a courtier. It says in this Penguin Classics brief biography, part of an ancient Italian aristocratic family. So he had it made.
Definitely
Hmm.
knew what he was on about then.
Yeah.
Is the book something that was formally published, or was it like one of those things that it gets written and gets passed around the author's friends and circles? Just wondering if it was something that was available to young courtiers who might be just starting out on their networking journey, I guess.
Okay. When he'd written it, yeah, he roughed out a a draft about 10 years before it was probably finished. And kind of wrote it in a period when he got fired from a nuncio job, just a regular kind of courtier job. I was living on his estate and just basically writing out a whole bunch of stuff about how these conversations go. He showed it to several friends, including Pietro Bembo, who appears in it. Um, yeah, he was constantly urged to publish it. Little more was done, however, until 1526. Um, when somebody, when he had, yeah, little was done until 1526 when he heard of somebody's death, and he had a lot of memories coming back of like that time of his life. So it was very much towards the end of his life. He didn't have to.
But it was like published.
Yes, April 1528. Um, Distributed as a small circulation to friends and to the most important personages. But being Castiglione, somebody from a noble line who is a diplomatic figure, that's going to be everyone. This
Yeah.
guy partied.
And also, like, I feel like friends and important personages for someone active in court circles, yeah, is gonna cover most people who can read.
Yeah, definitely.
He sounds very much like the guy who knows everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it's something that's come up just again and again every time you study the Renaissance. It's had a huge effect, I think, on people then, and also on the interpretation of it by modern scholars like Stephen Greenblatt, who's like the man when it comes to um, just broad studies of the Renaissance. Um, Likes to talk about self-fashioning, which seems to be seems to come up in this book a bit as a concept of, well, why would you not dress yourself up a bit fancy? Because that's a skill, so that's not fake. Like the blacksmith thing and the jewel, it's yes, you're changing something, it's not natural, but the fact that you did it makes it so, makes it natural. It's
It's quite nice, really.
yeah,
Only you can make you.
exactly. And it's not something it's something that seems to be brought up that they don't extend to women, that same notion.
Mm.
It's masculine self-fashioning.
Well, that's because women don't have agency.
Yeah.
Souls.
Makes me think of the
Women are just horny and extravagant and need to be stopped. That's the Renaissance attitude, right?
yeah. It's yeah, it's not a book I've thought about for a while, but when we talked about it, when we brought up as a thing to discuss on the episode, it's got me really fired up and curious, and it's got some cracking stuff in there, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's it's a lot braver than expected. And I think that's the same is true for a lot of early modern works, because you just kind of picture them as being very um, controlled and stayed in their interactions with each other. Because a lot of modern historical dramas, for instance, if they're showing you a court, they're very prim and proper. They act like Victorians.
Yeah.
Um,
Even in stuff like Rain.
yeah, in stuff like Reign, which is about Mary Queen of Scots.
It is incredibly ahistorical.
Yeah,
It's ahistorical in very fun ways, but is also very. And everyone was very proper because they were posh and it was the olden times.
yeah, it's very much a 19th to 20th century idea of poshness. But if you want to be realistic about how people conducted themselves, then you need to be way freer with it. Like, stick a spittoon in there somewhere. It may not be correct, in strict materialist terms, but that gives you the vibe.
Yeah, it's like changing the music in a historical thing to pop so that people understand that it's the popular music of the time rather than playing some classical and everyone goes, classical, the sophisticated music.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is turning into a different discussion. I'm very sorry that people are getting just all of my historical fiction opinions.
Yeah, but I think coming back to the book, it's something that it is a very good general source on the kind of cultural conversations that would be going on.
Mm.
And like we've been saying for the past hour, it's really modern, and I think so much of the popular perception of the past is often in shows like that. So getting things from the horse's mouth is really different,
Definitely.
because you don't just get the one character who says, "Excuse me, I am the woman who stands up for herself and tries to change things." It's all
The
of these
woman who
women.
uses the word patriarchy in the 16th century.
Yes, it's all of the women in this book stand up for themselves in different ways, and they say they have different critiques of the way men view them, and the men often have critiques of the way men do things and view women, and don't necessarily follow through on them. It's a lot more layered than you get on TV.
It's really interesting as a kind of social, yeah, just like a slice of life, I guess. Yeah, I guess we do tend to think of the past as like a very serious place, possibly because a lot of the texts that we might have seen, especially in school, are more serious or perhaps moralizing ones. But this is, it sounds like he was having fun with it.
Yeah, I I feel it's kind of I think our perception of the past is kind of like if somebody went to the went to a park around here or a canal like a couple of 100 years on, and they found an ancient sign from our time that said "No swimming in the duck pond," and they concluded, "I see. It was a serious time. Nobody swam in duck ponds," rather than somebody did that, so they had to put a sign up. That's how I feel about all those moralizing works you mentioned.
Mm,
Um, they're all of this code is there because somebody broke it.
yeah, in order to be against something, that thing has to exist.
Absolutely, yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up because it's hard to see which side um, the book is on sometimes. It's just imagine this staged. Just take
Mm,
a couple of conversations from it and stick it up on stage, and you've got some contemporary theatre, really, just about ideas. And I think you get across a much more layered idea if you actually acted it out. That's my suggestion. I'm closing on as a guest. Anybody out there with a stage in the cast, get Bemboing. Somebody be Bembo.
bemboing.
Yeah. You want a Bembo?
I'm uncertain what that would involve, so I'm gonna say no.
Would you hate me if I bemboed with your spouse?
Yeah, just
As long as you remain 6 feet apart. Leave room for Renaissance Jesus.
I don't know if Bembo is the best lines, but he has the best name.
Yeah, it's a very good name. Um, so yeah, on on that note, um, yeah, if you want us to make you a bonus episode, um, or if you want access to Patreon exclusive recipes and a Discord server, we are on Patreon as Bread and Thread.
We also have a Twitter at Bread and Thread where you can see updates about the episodes, what's coming up next, things that we've been up to, and historical hot takes.
And if you want to suggest an episode or inform us of your bemboing, you can email breadandthreadpodcast@gmail.com. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time with sumptuary laws.